Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Patty Brennan Show. Whether you have $20 or $20 million, this show is for those of you who want to protect, grow, and use your assets to live your very best lives. You know, that phrase really makes me think about what is really important to people. Is it really the assets or is it the memories? Joining me today is Roy Möed. Roy is the founder of Lifebook Memories, and we've had phenomenal conversations over the past few months about what his company does for people to preserve those memories that are near and dear to their families. Roy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's very exciting, and being English, it's quite interesting to be involved in a show like this. So thank you.
You're very welcome. It's really interesting what you do for families. How did you start this company? How did it all begin?
Well, the fascinating thing is you in your opening you talked about assets and how and memories. I see assets as being memories as well. There are the financial assets and the financial values you pass down, or the financial value you pass down. But the your values and your memories are difficult to pass down, and that was part of the beginning. And it was also very much about my father. I was too busy to listen to him, or he would tell me a story, and Dad, I've heard that before, and I'd start shutting him down. And I did that three times. And I thought, you know what? He's blind. He's sort of 86 and he's not he's pretty depressed. I need to find a way to help him enjoy his elder years.
Mm.
And because I thought I was too busy running around doing my stuff, I went off and got my secretary to go and visit him. We created this folder of the chapters of his life, and she went and visited him every week and started recording them. It was on the pretext that we wanted his stories, but I didn't really. I wanted him to have the companionship.
Mm.
It was only after a short while, 3 months later, when he passed away, I realized that there were many stories in there that I'd never heard, including the one about the King of Poland, our ancestor being the King of Poland for one night, when the king died and they needed a commoner without issue in 1568, and there was this Saul Wall, and they grabbed him and made him King of Poland for one night. Now, he'd never told us that story, and I just felt I couldn't ask him anymore. He'd gone.
It is so interesting and so wonderful that out of a concern for your dad and getting him some companionship, you uncovered an idea that is making such a difference to so many families. Roy, as you were talking, I was reminded of something that a colleague of mine, Ron Carson, once said. He said, "An inheritance is what you give to someone. A legacy is what you put into them." And what you've done is created a company and a way to really provide that legacy to people that we love, that we care about, and really giving them a real legacy that stays with the family forever. As we think about transferring wealth, this is more of a wisdom transfer, isn't it?
Totally. And when you talk about legacy, I do talk about the value of legacy, not money. And it came to me that within my presentation, I talk about Alfred Nobel, and many people aren't aware of his story that in 1868, I think it was, he was in Paris and he saw his brother had passed away, and they wrote his obituary. They made a mistake. They wrote Alfred Nobel's obituary rather than his brother.
Mm.
And it said, Le Marchand de la Mort est mort, the merchant of death is dead. The man who killed more people quicker than anyone else has now died because he invented dynamite and gelignite. And he then said, my God, that's going to be my legacy. And he took his wealth, which in those days was about $2 million, and he went and he created the five Nobel Prizes that we know today. And he changed his legacy. He
Mm.
had the luxury of seeing what his legacy was going to be and changed it. And I often say to people, are you happy with the legacy that you're going to be leaving? Do you want to do something about it? And now's the time.
Mm.
And when we started Lifebook Memoirs, the whole concept, before we started, we went to the Brain Health Institute in Toronto, Cognicity, and we spent 6 months researching with them and interviewing two of their residents with two of their researchers to look at how could we slow down cognitive decline in elder adults by engaging with them over a period of time. And the fundamental thing, the difference between Lifebook Memoirs and every company is that we do in-person interviews. You do not want to be talking to a 92-year-old and they're crying about losing their husband or their son got killed or laughing and the video sort of wavers and stuff like that. Or you can't reach out and give them a glass of water or touch their hand. So fundamental to what we did and what we discovered there at Cognicity was that all of our interviews are a human sitting with your mum and dad or you in your home, having a cup of coffee, or I found out recently one of our clients has had a glass of wine every time, but whatever it is, but actually chatting to someone and ending up with a beautiful memoir.
So interesting because what the story that you just told reminded me of how I came about meeting you. I was literally with someone who is 92 years old, and we were having lunch, and I just love this woman. She's got amazing stories. And I kept on thinking, gosh, I wish I had a camera. I wish I had something to write this stuff down. And I found myself literally, Roy, in my car writing down some of the things that she had said because, that stuff just sticks with me. And it occurred to me that I knew somebody who is one of the people who does this for your company.
Yeah.
She's a ghostwriter and she does those visits and those interviews. And my friend is such a warm, wonderful human being. So I called her and I said, I asked her, tell me more about your process. Tell me more about the company. And one thing led to another, and here we are today. People need to know that this is there. It's how many times I've talked to people and said, have you ever written any of this stuff down? What about all your pictures? What about, the
Uh,
how do you communicate with the kids? And I'm just going to take, if you don't mind, Roy, I'm just going to show people who are watching the video some of the material that you put together. These are, you know, we make it easy to share your life story in a beautiful life book. This is amazing. Look at this cover page. Look at this cover. Isn't that
my
gorgeous?
father, yeah.
Wow, that's your
That
dad.
was the first story, and yes, and they're great pictures, and then it's all printed on this archive paper because even Google uses this paper to protect their archive because
Mm.
you will lose digital recordings and digital records, but a book you don't lose. Our printer actually says on his website that if you want to go and read the Magna Carta from 1086, you can go and turn over the pages with white gloves. But if you want to read a floppy disk from 1996, you can't.
You know, when you think about the value of having an actual book with family pictures and all of the stories, we live in a digital world today, right? Facebook, Instagram, you name it. And, you know, I think about my own kids. They, launch these stories on Instagram that evaporate in 24 hours. If you
Yeah.
don't see it in the 24 hours, forget it. It's gone. This is something that isn't lost and it stays in the family forever.
But Patty, it's actually worse than that because what people forget is that if I Google you, I can find loads of information about you and
It's all
people who would
noise.
generate. Yeah, it's all,
Don't believe a word of it, Roy. All right.
well, some of it you do, some of it you don't. But you can find a lot of information about people who are in just that sort of age profile and below. What you can't do is find out anything about your grandmother on Google. You can't Google her. And your mother's great grandmother, your mother's grandmother is your great grandmother or grandfather. There's no information on that. And that story dies when those people pass away and those stories and those memories. And whilst kids today think that information is all there forever. It isn't. So those stories, if they're not recorded, they'll never be heard.
It's very interesting. I was at a conference one time and there were 500 people in a room, and the speaker was talking about this subject. And he asked a question to the audience. He said, "How many of you remember the first names of your grandparents?" And most of us kind of raised our hands. Okay, I pretty much, I think I remember all four of them. And then he asked a question. He said, "How many of you know the first names of your great grandparents?" Roy, no one raised our hands. And then he had a mic drop moment. He said, "Isn't it a shame to think that 100 years from now, people aren't even going to remember our names?"
I just got a shiver down my spine.
It
Um,
was really a moment. And, again, it's not, I was thinking about this and I was talking with, a member of your company. And I said, I don't think I'm all that interesting. And then as she started to ask me the questions, I love the format. You've got a very precise format on how to bubble things up. She said, "You'd be surprised at the stories and the things and the transfer of wisdom that you could partake in something like this." So it's a
it's
really,
not just the wisdom. Sorry to interrupt. It's not just the wisdom, it's the fun. You know,
yeah.
you want to know the stories. Nobody wants to know every business deal you did and and what you sold your every house for and etc. Some of it's interesting and factual, and some people put it in there. But they want to know what happened when you were 14 and you had your first girlfriend or your first kiss or how you got from whichever country you got to as an immigrant and literally got there. We asked one of our customers why he did his lifebook memoir, and he said, "Well, I was driving my grandchildren in the back of the car one day, and they had a school friend with them. And the school friend said to them, 'So, what does your granddad do?' And my grandson said, 'Nothing. He's just rich.'"
Oh my
And I
God.
thought to myself, this person said, I thought to myself, if I don't write it down, they're going to think I was just rich. And they don't realize I came from Hungary. I had $4 and I became just rich through quite a journey. And
Hmm.
that's the point. And I mean, this guy, this is one of the books we did, which is sorry, you can't really see that, but he's in
Oh,
that jeans shirt which had studs in the 60s. But he told it, and this is his photograph today. He's
wow.
still able to get into the same shirt. But he told us his reason for doing his book was that he heard his daughter telling his stories one day and getting them wrong. And he thought, I better actually tell the right stories if that's going to work. And one of the side effects, or somebody sent me a text a few days ago, and it was headed unintended consequences. And he said,
Hmm.
"Roy, you did my parents' life books about 9 years ago, and that was fabulous. And I've always loved having them. But now my mother's passed away, my father's becoming demented. He's got Alzheimer's and he's losing his memory quite rapidly. He's walking around the house with his life book, and that is his memory. It's like
Oh.
he's downloaded his memory, and he looks at pictures of the wedding of his wife, of his youth, and it can trigger him for that purpose. And he said, I'm texting you this with a tear in my eye. Thank you."
It's amazing what a gift that was to that man.
Yeah.
For him to be able to look at the book and look at the pictures and read about the memories and be reminded of what a full life he has lived. Even though his wife has passed, she's still with him in his heart. And that is a gift. Oh, I get teary just thinking about it.
And one person said, I recognize you can't ensure your memory. We're all going to lose it at some stage, but you can ensure your memories if you write them down, whether it's with a lifebook memoir or writing a journal, or as you did, jotting down those answers when you did that. But it's also important that they're face-to-face interviews, and the aspect that you brought up in your Forbes Summit
Yes.
presentation. about, I think it was Dr. Kaufman of
Hmm.
MIT Age, something.
Yep. Joe Coughlin of MIT Age Lab. Yep.
And you said the increase in loneliness went from 9% in elder adults to 17%. And that was a few years ago. So
Mhm.
God knows what it is today. We have UK statistics in England that say 4.6 million people in 2024 over the age of 65 are consider themselves as lonely and only speak to a human once a month.
Mm.
They use television as their only form of human contact. And isn't that terrible today that we
Yeah. Mm.
we leave people with that? I know you're into financial planning and the background of what you do and some of the incredible things you do. But it's so important that this legacy is more than just your money, but also your values.
Yes, and what Dr. Joe has shared with us that work with him is that the impact of loneliness is like smoking 11 cigarettes a day. I mean, it's a big deal. It really affects a person's health. And
Accelerate, sorry, go on.
yeah, and what I was speaking at Forbes about was the impact of Social Security, not the monthly check that people get. It's that feeling of being with someone that shares your values, that really cares, that's taking the time to listen and just spend the time with you. It's just having a warm, cozy body around. Um,
Taking the time to listen and being heard. We often hear about that, but you know, a kid can take time to visit his parent whenever, but actually not looking at their watch, not looking at their phone, and actually listening and being heard and having other conversations that result because you've now listened to something or you read it in their memoir and you say, Dad, I never knew you did this. And we hear
right.
that all the time.
Yeah.
That
Mm.
opens, refreshes the intergenerational relationships, which is
It
so important.
It is very important. And it's something that was, you know, such a big part of growing up. You know, we talk about it takes a village to raise someone, and we don't have the villages anymore. And it's really a shame because all generations are hurt by that. You know, the spreading out and the lack of content. And to your point, a text message isn't the same. Even a phone call isn't the same. It's just that presence, that listening that makes such a difference. So
You
here's,
know,
yeah, go
but
ahead.
you know when a text message does make a difference,
Mm,
and you're 100% right, but it just reminded me this, my favorite book of all time, that we've done over 20,000 people in the world now own a life book.
mm,
I'm not sure if I can find it in here, but we did what isn't a standard life book for a lady whose husband dropped dead age 42,
wow.
and he was a fitness guy and he was in his gym and he had a heart attack, and she was 4 months pregnant with a 15-month-old baby boy.
Wow.
And he thought, they're never going to know their dad. So very bravely, it was about 2 years afterwards, her name's Karen, she commissioned us to interview 26 people in New York, London, Beirut, and Lagos. And we did 26 interviews. The book is called Unforgettable, and that's
Wow.
Tony. And it's actually it's that one on the bookshelf there as well. That's the one with the dust.
Mm,
And every story in there, she starts the book by saying, the reason I'm doing this is because if I tell stories to my kids about their dad, they'll think it's just blah, blah, because I loved him, etc. But from 26 people from his school friends right the way through his life, telling stories. And then every chapter is separated by some artwork that they collected together with a little story. Now, she only had 3 copies made and 2 are in a safe until the boys are 10. But what will that book mean to them when they're 10, when they're 50?
wow. That is amazing. So as I think this through, it's amazing the fact that you will interview people in the person's life because it feels like, you know, I don't know that I would feel like, oh, nobody wants to read a book about me. It feels sort of, I don't know, this is a bad way to describe it,
Not
but
an ego thing. It's not, this is not vanity publishing. There's a whole market in, you're going to be famous, you've got a wonderful story, and you're gonna sell loads of copies, etc. We put a very strong line between that. We only print 10 copies. They're just for the family.
mm, okay, that's
And
really cool.
so it's more about it's your responsibility to write this book because anything can happen tomorrow. You can have a heart attack and be paralyzed or whatever, and you can't get that story out. And you don't want to be doing it when someone is ill. You want to be doing it when they're well. We do a lot when people are ill or terminally ill. That's obviously a time when people recognize they need to get that story down when they have a terminal illness. And what we find it extends their time
Mm,
because they want to finish their project, and
yeah,
sometimes quite considerably. We don't like finishing those books.
yeah. Mm.
But it's really important that people have that opportunity to record their story, and everybody has a story for their family.
What I think is so fascinating is exactly that, how you are able to bring that story out of people. Again, I have the luxury of having my friend who does this for your company, and it's just so interesting. It comes down to the questions that are asked and how, taking an interest in their life and looking at the pictures and asking the questions, where were you here? What were you doing? And to your point, it's really not about the rags to riches so much. It's just helping the next generation and future generations to understand that things that they're going through are things that every generation has gone through. They're not alone. And just teach them, give them the tools that work for us. We're not pontificating, but it's just a beautiful way of sharing ideas and things that got you where you are. And by the way, it doesn't have to be super success. I find some of the most interesting people are, the people that you wouldn't think have a story to share, and yet they're so fascinating. Again, just taking the time to listen, to understand about the direction of their life and where they are today, what got them to being who they are. It's a wonderful gift to give not only to the person who is sharing the story, but to the family.
Yeah.
So, and
And we have a whole range of people who do it, and there is a surprising number of people who don't have any children to give it to.
mm,
But back to your point about 100 years from now, we'll be forgotten. If you don't have kids, if you don't have grandkids, it's actually a way of saying, well, I lived and I lived this life, and that book will remain in print forever, some junk shop or whatever, but I have recorded my time on this earth. So it's quite funny that we have a number of those, and a number where they may have been through a war which they didn't want to talk about with their family, or so because they couldn't talk about it. But we had one who had survivor's guilt and he never talked about it with his family, but he put it in his book that he survived Dunkirk when his regiment got wiped out because he'd been transferred the day before, 96-year-old private in the army, and he'd never told the story to his family. But it's so important that you've got that opportunity to get that story down.
I think of this as being one of the most meaningful gifts a person can give. How do they get started? What do they do? I mean, I think about it's not just for super busy, high achieving people, it's for everyone, right?
You exactly, and we coined the phrase about 10 years ago that it's the gift of a lifetime
Mm.
because you're giving someone that whole lifetime, and they give it back to you as well. A lot of people, a lot of our customers are in their 80s or 90s, and they will do it. And then on their 80th birthday, give a signed copy to each of their kids. So they actually do it privately or secretly and then give it back. And it's one of the things you said earlier about the questions that we ask. unlike our interviewers are all individually trained, and they're trained. We have a process document which takes them through how to deal with all the situations. And they don't have a list of questions. They take people on two journeys, either chronologically through their lives or on subject matters, depending, different people like it different ways. But they're trained to take the story down that path. And because our process is the interviewer in the home is not the writer, they're trained to interview. That goes up to our platform. And the ghostwriter that we've picked, which has got a similar background, Asian, Jewish, Irish, whatever it is, to match the nuance of the person and the culture. The ghostwriter downloads it, writes it up, uploads it. The editor goes in, looks at it, checks it. And this project goes on over about 6, 7 months. What that means is if the ghostwriter feels that whilst interviewing you, we're in the middle of a story, but he doesn't have enough material because person said they were playing hooky from school and you didn't ask where did they go or who were they with. They can feed back to the interviewer. So the
Oh,
next meeting, they do this. And we don't use AI for any of this because, as I said, the human in the room with your grandmother or mother is essential, but the humanity that comes through from the ghostwriter can't be replicated by AI. And they don't think that'll happen for 5 or 10 years. So that whole journey is something that is iterative and that the person's involved in. And as with many situations, when you're talking to a third party, you give up things that you might not have otherwise.
yeah. Yeah.
And so they have full editorial capacity. So at the end of the book, there are people who've said things. They've said things maybe about someone else's story, about someone having an affair with someone or on cocaine or whatever, we're in that position where we say to them, look, that's not your story to tell. What if their grandchildren of that person finds out that they used to
Yeah.
snort coke or whatever? So we're kind of counseling along the way to get
Mm.
the right story and something that they'll be proud of and happy with.
That is amazing. You know, the humanness of the process, that element of really caring about another human being, about their story, and really wanting to listen and document it. And it's just amazing what you have built here. How long have you been in business? How long, when did you start this?
So it's coming up for 15 years, and as I said, there's over 20,000 of life books in the world, and that's my legacy because
Wow.
I had a background in food before and airline catering, and a little bit like Nobel, I wasn't going to be happy with airline food being my legacy. So now I have all these fabulous stories.
Amazing. You know, as you were talking, I was thinking about an article that I read recently, and it was about encouraging people to do their pre-mortem. In other words, write their own obituary. Think about what would be written and would they be proud of it? And yes or no. And it's, we all have things in our past that we may or may not be proud of. And that's okay. That's all part of being human. And the beauty of your process is it gets documented, but people still have control of over the outcome. I love that. It's an amazing thing that you've done here, Roy, and what a gift. How do people get started? I mean, I'm just curious. How do they contact your company?
Literally, our website's lifebookmemoirs.com, and we have people which we call lifebook memoir advisors who will talk to people. All of our sales are over the telephone and face to face. They're not, you don't go online and buy something of this
Mm.
scale. The Royal, which is the bookshelf product on the back behind me in the main there, that's for bookshelves. Other people want coffee table books. So our prices range from $18,000 to $42,000.
Mhm.
But the book Royal one takes 200 hours of work.
Right.
And these books are handmade, they're sewn, and at the end, one of my favorite bits, and this again we're unique in doing, when the customer signs off their book, the galley proof, which is printed on the beautiful paper, and we authorize it to go to print. They have an extra hour interview with the interviewer, which we've scripted with them, or they read from the book. And we get an hour of your grandma's voice. And
Wow.
we put it in this little book and it goes on a USB stick. And that means that you've got forever her laughing, crying, whatever, telling those stories in her voice. And before we print the pictures in the book, we improve every one. We take out red eye if there's a tear in a newspaper article or a wedding certificate. We repair it. And we put all those repaired photographs back on here. So the family has in one place, not just the book, but this audio and photograph record forever.
Amazing. I think about the amount of money I have spent on, stupid stuff, gifts, what have you, and to be able to channel that into something that is so permanent, like a life book memory, a memoir. It's just an amazing idea, Roy. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing your story and the stories of the people that you've been able to do these books for. And to all of you, I hope you have a wonderful day and really think about sharing your memories for the people that you love and the generations to come. Have a
Thanks,
great day.
Kathy.
Thank you.